This episode is brought to you in part by my loyal patrons. If you've ever wanted to support what this podcast and what my music does, then you should go check it out. You can go to barenakedbravery.com/Patreon. That's Patreon. And you can see what it's like to become a patron of the podcast. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. This is the place where we expose the threads of heroism that stitch together the stories we admire most. As a musician, singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and business owner, I encounter some really fascinating stories. Every episode you'll hear features a revealing conversation with someone who courageously pours themselves out into the world. We'll talk about fears befriended, the terrors battled, and the courage created along our stories of bravery, quiet heroism, and all-out gutsiness. We open the Pandora's box of the dream-crushing constraints we all face during significant moments of bravery. These moments of bare naked bravery are rarely censored in real life, so if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. The questions I ask today aren't scripted because I'm just curious. What is bravery? My hope for us all is that by listening to others search for and find their bravery, we will find our own. For that is what we need most, to know that we are not alone. The best way you can support the show is to share it with a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle's Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Bottom line, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Carly Nimmo joins us today all the way from Australia. Carly and I know each other through the beauty of social media. She is a born communicator. She's an ex-radio jock, producer, and copywriter, and she's also a current in-demand voiceover artist and has run her successful voiceover agency called Killer Copy with 2 Ks for over a decade. There's a pretty slim chance you haven't heard her voice. Carly is also an avid and successful podcaster, with her #1 iTunes hit, Carlosophy's Stories Behind Success. Her current mission is to rid the world of shit-sounding podcasts. I love that. I think it's true. I think there's a lot of really awful things out there, and when we have something really good to say, it's worth saying. Because both of us have podcasts, Carly and I thought it would be fun to trade interviews with each other. So we've magically coordinated to have my interview of her publish on the same day her interview of me goes live on her own podcast. Cool, huh? All of that is cool, yes. But today, Carly and I talk about depression. Downer, big downer. We also talk about bankruptcy, also a big downer, and how to hold our big emotions, which is not as much of a big downer as it is just a big challenge. We also talk about how to be vulnerable in the world. And specifically, we get down to the nitty-gritty of what do you do when you feel like you're in the thick of it, like really in the thick of it, you know what I mean? Carly is delightful, and so is this conversation. Let's jump on into it. Are you ready for some bare naked bravery?
I think so.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, Carly, you are here all the way from Australia.
Correct.
You are the first handful, amongst the first handful of our international guests on the show. And I'm always so excited to have people from outside the US join the show because I think that different cultures have so much to say about bravery.
Totally.
And it's a completely different perspective too.
I agree.
How do you see the difference between the US and the Australian version of bravery?
Oh, that is a big question.
I know.
I don't know. Yeah, okay. Australians have what we call tall poppy syndrome,
Yes.
which essentially means you have your head too high, it'll get chopped off. So I don't know that we're very humble people, but we as a culture don't value so much fame. Any extremes are not really valued in our culture. So what that ends up manifesting into is a bunch of people who really have a lot of fear around standing out. It's like you can be who you are, but just don't be too loud or, abrasive in that. Don't stand out too much. So in terms of being brave in my own culture, it means being willing to step up and be seen and be heard for who you are, and not really worrying so much, not trying to protect everyone else from their feelings. So that's kind of what I feel like is an Australian approach to bravery.
You have a podcast, Carlos,
Yeah. Yeah.
and which I am a subscriber of and I love. You have some pretty ballsy stuff that you say. First of all, how did you make the decision to step into the world of podcasting in the midst of this cultural tall poppy phenomenon?
Yeah. So for me, I guess that story starts maybe around 2009. And I had moved to an area where I didn't know anyone. It was in the middle of, not in the middle of nowhere, but kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was like 5 hours to any kind of real big city. So it was right in between. It's like 500 kilometres to Sydney, about 500 kilometres to Brisbane. On the coast, beautiful place, knew no one, and fell into a pretty hardcore depression. Had severe anxiety and went on a bit of a journey to rediscover who I was and all that kind of jazz. So part of that included me running on the beach. That was part of my exercise, was a big part of my, I won't say recovery, but management of depression. So it was a lot of therapy. I did a lot of therapy and I tried a lot of alternative healing and did a lot of work around my values and all that kind of jazz. And one thing that I did was I used to run on the beach every single day and I would have such clarity while I was down there. And then I'd come back in my car and come home and try to blog about it. And it was gone. It was like the clarity only happened in that moment where I guess maybe, I don't know, the endorphins were flowing and then I'd come back and it would be just gone. And I really wanted to share with people the insights that I was having. So I started, this was like back when people were using hip top phones or whatever they were. So it was like quite, not that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago technology wise. And so I couldn't just record it with my phone. So I used to run down on the beach with a little handheld video camera, videotaping myself when I got into that state, just sharing something that had come to me. And they were simple things like be the change you want to see in the world, that kind of stuff. And then I would come back and I would put it out on YouTube. And it was scary as all hell because, I'm running, I'm sweaty, it's gross, and I'm just speaking whatever is going on. And actually what I think, because I was trying to blog it, but I just couldn't find, I am a decent writer. My background is also in copywriting. So I know how to write, but I just felt like writing while you're feeling really inspired on the beach is really hard. So I would just video it. And I think what helped me get over myself was the people who were coming to me saying, oh my God, I have depression too. And I've never been able to speak to anyone about it. So for me, it was just like in service of them, helping myself get over myself, share what's really going on so that then people could feel okay about themselves. And that's really how it's continued on over the last however many years. It's been like 6 or 7 years now. And Carlosophies, the podcast, started, I thought, well, I missed videotaping myself and putting it out there. And I had recovered at that stage. And so from there, I went on this other weird journey. So I still was kind of searching I felt like I needed to find my purpose and my passion. And so I was kind of going on that journey of finding it. And during that, I moved back to Byron Bay, where I live now. And I thought moving back would fix all my problems because it was like I was coming home. But when I got here, I was still the same person. And so I just still felt really alone. So I opened a co-working space in Byron Bay back in 2012, and it was a dismal failure. It failed in the first year. It was just like nearly basically cost me my life.
How did it fail?
Oh, I opened the doors, I built it and they will come kind of philosophy, opened the doors and hadn't really, so co-working was very new in Australia at that stage, very, very new. I was the first regional co-working space ever. So it wasn't a proven model in a small community, but in my community, it's full of artists and people who work for themselves from home because there is no industry. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs working from their lounge rooms. There's actually 8,000 residents in Byron Bay, but there was 5,500 businesses registered.
No way.
Yeah. So I kind of thought, well, there has to be enough of a market in that for me to get 30 people. But I had to do all this education to teach people about co-working. So I was already on the back foot. Now there's 3 co-working spaces in Byron. It's a common thing now. Co-working is like a concept that's understood, but back then it wasn't. Even though it was only 4 years ago, it was new. So I had to do a lot of education, had a business partner. She had to leave due to really personal reasons and I couldn't keep her in there for her well-being. It just wasn't worth it. So long story short, I was open for about a year, cost me $100,000 and closed the doors and was just a broken person, really.
Do you remember the moment where you realized,
Yeah. I remember the moment when I realized that I had to shut the doors. And that was, I'd come home because I was just sitting there all day, every day. Actually, just a few days ago, a post came up, those reminder, this on this day 5 years ago, things on Facebook, and it came up and it said, oh, yay, the Office Collective, which was the co-working space, we had our first client sign up today. And then I thought to myself, hang on, I had already been open for 3 months at that stage. 3 months and not a single paying client.
Wow.
And $4,000 a month was the rent. So it was just like, and that paying client was $150 a month. I had a long way to go. And so after, when I reached almost that year period, my other business had been floating this one. So I'd basically been pulling all of the money from that to pay for this because I didn't have enough money to pay for everything. I didn't pay the tax office. And the tax office came calling one day, thankfully on the phone, not on the door, and they wanted me to pay them $16,000. And I didn't have enough there to pay rent on my house, let alone my mortgage of the house that I had lived in the area that I hated living, which had lost value. So it was just a nightmare, financial nightmare. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was bawling my eyes out to the tax office saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. And I literally considered taking my own life. That was how bad it had gotten, because it just seemed to me like, what's the point of going on? I can't. This is the only way out. Commercial leases in Australia, they're ironclad. You can't get out of them. Yeah. And so it was really bankruptcy or the other option. And so thankfully, straight after I got off the phone, I had come home because I was doing a coaching call with a friend of mine who was studying to be a life coach, and the poor girl. And so she got me at my lowest of low ever. And I just cried and cried and cried. And then she shared me this image of above and below the line. So above and below the line is like, it's a line, and then above it are all kind of positive states. So above the line is love, and then below the line is fear, and above the line is abundance, and below the line is lack, and above the line is hero, and below the line is victim, and so on and so on. And she said to me, just have a look at the line and tell me where you are on the line. And I was like, I'm like below the line. There is not one area in my life where I'm above the line right now. And then one of them was choice was above the line. And it just stuck with me. I was like, hang on a second, I've forgotten. I have choice. I still have choice. It can be hard. It can be a hard choice, but I've got choice. So then and there, I kind of was like, well, the choice is I can go on as I am with the hope that this is going to improve, or perhaps it's time to just cut my losses. And I knew that if I if I took another friend of mine said to me, same day, close your eyes, imagine it in all its glory. Everything is going so perfectly well. The place is pumping. You're making decent money from it. That stress isn't there anymore. Is that worth what you're going through now? And I was like, hell no. So then the decision was very easy for me. So the next day I went back into the office. I put a post out I actually walked along the beach because I do that every day. And I said out loud to the universe or whoever was listening, okay, so I'm going to take a step. I'm going to try to find someone to sublet my space. And I want you to come and meet me. And so I wrote a post on Facebook that just said, I'm out. And if anyone knows anyone who wants to sublet a great space, fully furnished until the end of lease, let me know. And one of my mates came back to me and goes, yep, I'm looking for a space. Wow. So then, bam, it was done. So I closed the doors. He moved.
Isn't it always amazing that when you cut your losses, how quick it?
Oh, super quick. And this is the amazing thing, right? Because I also find that when you create space, better things come to you. So in that decision, I was like, yes, okay, I'm going to close the space. I'm going to walk away. And I'm just going to cut my losses. That weekend, I had won a weekend to celebrate at this resort in Byron. And that weekend I fell pregnant. And I had never thought that was ever a possibility for me. So it was very unexpected, but also really exciting. And so anyway, moving forward, I closed that, but I still had a lot of healing to do because I'd fallen back into the depression again, understandably so, with that amount of pressure.
Something that happens with entrepreneurs a lot, artists, same thing, are in the same.
Yeah, totally. Like creators.
They're putting out there, they're actually putting so much of themselves out there that they're putting their own worth and their own personal value into the thing that exists outside of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, like absolutely.
The umbilical cord of our creative things.
Yeah, and that was absolutely what had happened to me. So I had defined its failure as my personal failure. The people who didn't want to sign up, they were rejecting me, so it was really, really painful. And so that's actually how Carlosophy started, or how it was resurrected as a podcast anyway, because I had all this, I was just in this place where I was licking my wounds and I was pregnant. So I was getting my other business back to a profitable state. So after that day, when I decided that I was going to close it, the next day I came in and I drew that above and below the line image on one whole wall of my office. And I just started tracking incomings. And it just changed immediately. So I could see that money was coming in. I could, and that just attracted more money. It was like, it's the most bizarre thing, right? Like I just started not focusing on all the outgoings. I thought to myself, what is one thing that can get me above the line into abundance from lack? And it was like, well, I've got to focus not on what's outgoing and all the money that I'm hemorrhaging, but instead I'm just going to focus on the money that's incoming so that I can see that there is money coming. And so I started tracking it on a whiteboard, and business started improving straight from there, But I still had obviously a lot of healing to do. So I decided that after I'd had Mabel, then I hit like another new level, new devil kind of thing. So I was finding
that to anybody.
Yeah. So like just totally lost as a human being again. And again went into this place of not internalizing, but I feel like depression for me has always been internalizing. It's like the whole world comes back and I'm just this, I don't know, like I'm all alone. And motherhood was a bit like that for the first bit, but I was still also getting over the fact that I just lost $100,000 that I didn't have. And I'd been publicly humiliated by this experience. That's how I felt at the time, or personally rejected. So I just started Carlosophies because I wanted to talk to other entrepreneurs and friends of mine and, people that I admired and respected. I wanted to see how, I just wanted to open up a discussion about failure, and I wanted to talk to people about how they move through fear.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love about your show, because it's basically like mine, but it's like we talk about so many of the same topics. And the episodes that I've listened to, I really have gotten a lot out of for
Yeah.
the reason that I love listening to my own episodes as well.
Yeah, totally. I love listening to mine too. And because I love the things that, well, I love, when I'm on that beach and I'm walking, because I've got two formats to my show. So there's the long style interview format where I tell other people's stories. And then I ask them about, fear and failure and also, and what they struggle with, but also like, what does freedom mean and what does success mean? Because I find like that was my whole problem, right? I hadn't defined what failure was. So I allowed it to define me. And it's the same with success. If we haven't defined it for ourselves, other people will define it for us. So that was kind of the purpose of me opening up these conversations so that I could figure out what these things actually meant for me by speaking to other people who had also been through similar stuff. So yeah, so then my other format is me just walking on the beach again with my phone and my little lav mic and just talking about whatever I'm going through at that time. And then I always make sure there's something that the listener can take away and kind of fit just a question, like have a think, what would you do if you were brave? That's one of the things that I've kind of asked before. And yeah, and so it's just a way for me to share what I'm going through with the hope of helping other people. I got asked I was speaking at a conference a few weeks ago and somebody said to me, or they said we were opening up a discussion about it in the group that we're sitting having dinner with. And the question was, if you were to be handed an award for being who you are and what you bring to the world, what would that be? And for me, it was just
that is such
straight
a good
away.
question.
I know, it's such a good question, right? And so big, but the response was before she'd even finished saying it, it was there. And it's giving permission. That's what I feel like I'm here to do, give other people permission to step into lean into the discomfort and be more vulnerable. Because that is where you make the true connections and you learn so much about yourself. We have all these preconceived ideas about vulnerability, that it's not necessarily a good thing and it can be a weakness. But I've never found it to be that way. I've never felt weak when I'm sharing. I mean, sometimes I probably think I feel weak, but that's not the way it's seen externally. I'm not having a whinge fest. I'm just opening my soul to be seen. And that's a scary process. It's like, naked and brave. Like you can't get much more naked and brave than like fully leaning into discomfort. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, like just continually trying to lean into discomfort.
And it's one of those when I teach cello lessons or when I'm doing any sort of teaching with any student or a mentorship situation, discomfort is not always painful. And
no.
Even physically, like sometimes when things are uncomfortable, that just means it's new.
Mm.
It's still important to listen for pain because pain is telling us something, right? But the discomfort tells us stuff too. And it's usually like, hey, this is new. And that's about it,
Yeah. Yeah. And,
doesn't mean you should stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And stretching can be uncomfortable, right? And that's what we're doing when we're leaning into discomfort, is just stretching. It doesn't mean your muscles are going to snap. It's just that it's new. You've just reached a new level. And so you stretch into that.
Yeah.
And then it can feel uncomfortable for sure. But it's also quite nice when you stop stretching, you feel more expanded, like you've grown. So, yeah. It's a good feeling.
Okay, so from podcast host to podcast host, you're a couple years into this process than I am. So what have you learned from all of your guests in talking about a similar subject matter that we do in our show?
The key has been, and I've learned this through my podcast, but also through doing the podcast, I've been doing a lot of public speaking, which I'm absolutely loving. And meeting people who I've admired from afar, and I've watched their businesses and they're almost like famous. And what I've realized through that, having conversations with people at all levels, because I'm not someone who just gets big names on. In fact, I don't think I maybe have like two kind of big names in Australia anyway. And that is, we're all the same. We are all the same. We are all struggling with the same fear. We all worry about being rejected. We all think we're not worthy. these are recurring themes that happen again and again and again. And I have this question that I ask each guest, which is, we all have an evil bitch in our head telling us a bunch of untruths. What does yours say on repeat? And the answer, when you pare it back for every single person, is I'm not worthy or I'm not enough, which are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So it's like we are all the same. And I hate pedestaling people. I hate that idea that someone, because they have a bigger level of success or fame or fortune, that they are above you as a human being. No one is above you. We are all the same. You are me and I am you. And that has been the biggest lesson that I've learned over the last couple of years, is that we can look at other people and think that they're different to us, but they're not. And that's an interesting question that I've been asking myself a lot lately when I see something that triggers that, like a bit of envy or triggers that uncomfortableness. And I know that that's where I've got to lean into, because it's just showing me, like, this is where you need to go. And that just totally popped out of my head.
Well, my next question to you, based on that, I'm actually glad that you lost your train of thought there. It gives me a chance to ask it.
I had a baby.
It is this. It's, how do you plan on stretching into that? Now that you know that that's your next level.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things that I'm doing, because I'm actually going through this process right now. I've been wanting to write a book forever. And that's one thing that triggers me a lot. See people writing books and I'm like, damn. And so I'm leaning into that discomfort, and it's uncomfortable because all of that stuff comes up. Like, who do you think you are? You're not an author. You're not even that good of a podcaster. Like, nobody's going to want to read it. And the sad thing is that I have evidence to support that in my life, because I had this big business that I opened the doors and nobody came. So a story that I've carried around for a long time, which has kind of been like a self-fulfilling prophecy for me, is really that idea that I throw the party and no one comes. So for me, it's like, do I really, this is what I am.
Have you tried actually throwing a party and not sending out any invitations?
I've done that. That's the story of my life. That's what I do. But I haven't actually done that. But yeah, but that's kind of what I did.
Do it. You should just try it. Just try, like, put out the streamers, do the whole thing. Don't send any invitations and just sit in the empty party.
Yeah, I should. And then
that's my challenge.
Try that I'm so alone.
No, just sit in and just be furious. Just be angry.
Yeah. I have done, like, I've thrown a lot of parties. Even my daughter's first birthday. My daughter's first birthday was really a turning point for me, because I'd felt really alone for that year, and Mabel hadn't slept more than 45 minutes consecutive for that whole year.
Oh,
so I was broken. And I threw this party, and I invited like 60 people. So I catered for that many people. And the day of her first birthday, cyclone. So people couldn't physically get to my house. And I took it personally. I was like, nobody wanted to come. Nobody's ever there for me. Like, all the stories started coming out. But I kind of did that when I had the Office Collective too. So I threw this big party, and then I still felt resistance around spreading the word, So I didn't do all. I felt at the time I was doing all I could, but now I can see that there was way more that I could have done. I could have lent way more into the discomfort of putting myself out there. And, I see this happen all the time, because now I teach podcasting in my podcasting school, and I see people have the same thing, where they'll launch their blog, or they'll launch their business, or they'll launch their online course, or they'll launch their event, and then they kind of go into hiding and then go, why isn't anybody coming to my party? It's like, because you didn't send out the invites.
I've gotten a couple questions from you guys about whether the music that you're hearing in the episodes is mine or someone else's. The music is someone else's. It's a collection of musicians and artists that are represented by Music Box Licensing. And Music Box Licensing is a wonderful organization and company who I have friends who work with them. And I just really wanted to give all of those artists a shout out and give them some credit. So if you'd like to know who some of these artists are, I would go check out Music Box Licensing and listen to who is represented by them. I did this for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to showcase other people's artwork and music, and I think Music Box Licensing is a phenomenal organization that does that and supports the artists in the process without squashing them, which brings me to our sponsor for today, which is patreon.com. Patreon is a website that I use for my patrons to subscribe to support me every month. I have patrons who support me for as little as $1 a month, and some more than that. They get a sneak peek into some of the songs that I'm got going right now and what the recording process is like, and some of my touring process, and some of just my emotional behind the scenes process behind all of this, the podcast, the songwriting, the performing, the touring, everything. If you are curious about any of that, then I would suggest that you go check out patreon.com/Emily Ann Peterson, or you can just go to barenakedbravery.com/Patreon, which is spelled Patreon. You can sign up to become a supporter of the show and of my music. And if you do that, then you get access to a whole bunch of privately accessed stuff. I want to just thank you ahead of time. And anyways, regardless of what happens and regardless of how you support the show, your support, be it word of mouth or sharing the news or just a hurrah in your car alone, all of that is really felt by me, and it's really important that you care for your fellow artists and the people around you in whatever way you can. So I want to thank you for that, and also just say that I am just so grateful for all of the support that you're already giving. Thank you. What is it about sales? And this is going completely in a different direction now. I mean, maybe not in a completely different direction because it is related. When us creatives put something out there in the world, what is it that, other than the obvious feeling worthy, fear or feeling, what is it about sales that makes it so difficult?
I think because a lot of us measure our success by that. And that does come down to worthiness, I think. Like, honestly, at the core of it, that's what it is. And sabotaging behavior so that you create this. That's why when I started my podcasting school, Radcasters, I did it in the opposite way. So with the Office Collective, I had built it, opened the doors, they will come. And it didn't work out because that model rarely works unless you are, I don't know, like it just rarely works. It can work, but it's rare. With Radcasters, I did it in the opposite. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to, instead of building it and they will come, I'm not going to build anything. I'm just going to put it out there and see if anyone's interested in buying. And when somebody commits, then I'll create it for those people. And so it worked. I had 15 people sign up for that first course or the first round, and I created the course around them. And so now, like a year on, I've had like 100 people do the course, but I did it in the opposite way. So it was a bonus, not that my worthiness wasn't measured. Worthiness isn't measured in dollars. Worthiness is a feeling within us. And I do think with sales, a lot of it is, for me anyway, it was a lot of sabotaging belief to prove to myself that I was the person who threw the party and no one showed up. And still that voice is a lot quieter now because I've taken a different approach where it's like, it doesn't matter. I've done a lot of things I've tried a lot of different things. So I had my co-working space. I had an online magazine. I ran a mastermind. I was taking groups through this program called Show Up, Speak Up. And most of them have been pretty abysmal failures. One course I ran recently had one person sign up, and I still went into that place. Oh, nobody likes me. Nobody values me, and your value isn't a financial value. Yeah. So, and I think like a lot of people just have blocks around asking for a sale too. So, and that just comes back to worthiness as well. So yeah, I mean, I can try and find a puzzle piece that isn't worthiness, but it feels like it really all is.
I'm completely with you on that. I really do think that your willingness to sell something is how much you value the thing that you're
Yeah.
and if the thing you're selling is you or has a part of you in it still, like if you haven't cut the
Yeah.
umbilical cord from the thing you've created, then when somebody rejects or when you try to sell that thing, you're trying to sell yourself. And somehow that value system that you have for your own self gets in the way
Mm.
of you actually clearly telling the person that needs the thing you have made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have a girlfriend who's a very successful online entrepreneur, and she has struggled with that herself over the years. And now, even though, because, there's this whole thing about being authentic and making sure what you do is created with heart and soul and all that kind of jazz. And that's great. Like, I'm not dissing that, because I do think we need to be authentic, but and things need to be done with love and all that kind of jazz for sure. But this particular friend of mine, she recently made the decision that she is a personal brand, and she would view her personal brand as separate from herself. So she would call it, that her, as that her, not her.
Her real
So,
self, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, it's still her, and she still totally creates authentic messaging, and her product is still from the heart and all that kind of jazz, but it's not her. So it's not representative of her as a human being. It's a business, which is very separate, even though it's a personal brand.
Right.
So I think like having that separation sometimes can be a really good thing. And that was definitely one of the key things that I'd learned through the Office Collective, was to have separation. But then I have other entrepreneurial friends who swear by going all in as you. And if you can deal with the rejection, then maybe that's the way to go. I think like there are always more than one way to skin a cat. And I hate that phrase, but you know what I mean? Like, there's different rules for different fools. So you just got to do what's right for you. And if you can go all in as you and not feel emotionally attached and like everything that's happening to the business is happening to you, then if you're resilient enough to have that be your reality, then that's the way for you to do business. I think sometimes we just try to put things into too many boxes and then close the lid, and we're not a box. So yeah, I think there's always more than one way to do something. And for me, I'm still a personal brand, and my messaging is still like, my podcast is still me, but then I have businesses that run separately to me, still in my own voice, still emotionally invested in the business, but I'm not the business.
Right.
Yeah.
It is something that I think a lot of songwriters and a lot of artists, we go through the same thing. Like every time it took several iterations of what I'm about to describe for me to get to a place where I was like comfortable with it. But I would like put out a new song that I just wrote, and like wait for feedback or wait for like the likes on Facebook or
Mm-hmm.
and get crickets, total crickets. And then I'd have to give up multiple times on everything, just be like, oh, it's not worth it. I can't do it. And I got so fed up getting to that point of giving up because of some stupid Facebook likes. I was get so angry. And I actually think that the anger was the trigger point for me to go like, oh my gosh, no. Like I've had enough, drew the line in the sand and was like, no, I am choosing, like you did. I have choice here, and I'm choosing not to put all of my value in some silly vanity metrics.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see, with the work that I do with podcasters, I see that just shows up so much. So they'll get a few months in, and then they'll be looking at their downloads, and they'll be looking around to see what other people are getting. And then they come to me and they're like, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. And it's like, what do you think you're doing wrong? Like, what you're doing wrong is looking around for external validation to validate that your podcast is decent. If you're having fun doing it and you're having some level of engagement from your audience and your numbers are on the increase, I don't even look at my numbers, honestly. Like, I haven't looked at my numbers for a very long time, because it's not why I do it.
Right.
And why I do it is an expression of myself and to serve my audience. That's why I do my podcast. So metrics have nothing to do with it. But so often we're looking for external ways to validate us as a human being, whether it's Facebook likes or whether it's the amount of people who have visited your website, or if it's the amount of people who have enrolled in your online course, and that stuff doesn't, it's not our value as a human being.
I often will tell my marketing mentees, the very first couple of calls that I have with them, I'll ask them to find new numbers.
Yeah.
To
That's
measure
cool.
that success. One, for example, would be anytime somebody emails me being the client, anytime somebody emails me, the client, about how much they love my book that I just put out, that is a measure of success.
Yeah.
Not the number of dollars even that the book brought in, but just the quality of connection that somebody has with their new fans or whatever.
Yeah. And, connection is its own form of currency. I think so often we think it needs to be monetary, but actually connection's where it's at.
Oh, it totally is. And I think, and I think when you get to those low moments of getting distracted by the vanity metrics, having that list of other ways to define your success is so relieving.
Yeah.
Because you can go back through and go, oh, wait, I only got 2 Facebook likes, but I did get, in the past month, 5 people sent me an email about how much they enjoyed XYZ. And that feels a lot better to have those.
Yeah, for sure. I had a friend who used to always tell me to do it and I never did it. Create like a wall of things that made me feel good. So for me,
in my Gmail, I have a label in Gmail called Warm Fuzzies.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah, so anytime, write that down. Because anytime somebody sends me an awesome email, I'll just label it as Warm Fuzzies. And then when I'm having those really shitty, why am I doing this kind of days, I'll go back through and go, yes, I'm doing this because so-and-so left me an awesome voicemail, and that's why I'm putting out these episodes.
Yeah.
That's why I'm writing these songs. And that's
for sure. And I think that's another thing that I've learned through my podcast is that everybody has these moments. So we think for some reason, when you're in flow or you're living your true purpose, then there's never any struggle. But there always is. There's always going to be those days when you question, why the fuck am I doing this?
Yep.
You're always going to come up against that. Always. So, and it doesn't matter how successful you get, that voice is still there. So totally having something concrete that you can look at. But even more so than that, what I really want is to be able to find that within myself so that I'm not even seeking the emails from people, that I'm just doing it and trusting.
Well, but I think that's part of the...
Yeah, you need the evidence to support that too.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm thinking about when you learn to ride a bike, there's always some in-between version of a bicycle, either a tricycle or they have those, what are those little push bikes?
Yeah, like a little, yeah.
For kids now these days. It's still an in-between version of the real thing. And I think that having the Gmail labels, Warm Fuzzies, or a wall of cards that you've gotten from friends or whatever.
Yeah.
Having that is a crutch.
Yeah. But it's not a bad one.
A crutch to heal your ankle.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. For sure. And I think we just, as humans, we have this negative bias thing going on. So we can get 100 positive emails and then one person even remotely suggests that we're not worthy, and we just go into this.
Oh yeah. The deep dark hole.
Yeah. Yep.
So, okay, now that we've gone there to the deep dark holes, you are, as someone who is a professed, not victim, I would say, but
depressionist.
Yes. What tangible things do you have to suggest to folks for going through the depression, going through it when you're in the thick?
Yeah. Okay. So I felt I kind of created my own, I don't know, not my own version of depression, but I felt for me, it wasn't I was, and a lot of people kind of just think depression means that I'm just eternally sad and I'm crying all the time. And for me, it wasn't like that. It was like I was completely just disconnected from who I was. So I was kind of just felt like I was in this big, deep, dark hole by myself, and there was no rope, there was nothing. You know, I was just kind of there in my own little darkness all by myself, devoid of anything really. I just felt completely numb and very disconnected from anything that I valued. And, you know, in that space, things like follow your bliss, it's like, what? I didn't even know what the hell is bliss. Like, I hadn't connected to feeling for so long that I didn't even really know what bliss was. So eventually I realized that, and I did a lot of values work. So for me, I became more and more self-aware. I started listening to the chatter that was going on in my head, and I started actively taking steps to heal. So I would just, nothing was off the table. It was like, yep, I'll go and have an angel healing. Yep, I'll go. There was one healing I did where a chick had all these crystals and she burped for an hour. You know, yeah, like huge burps. But I was just like, I'm just going to try everything and anything to see what works and kind of what doesn't. And each time I did something, I just proved to myself that I could do something. I think I just gotten in this place where I thought I was worthless, totally worthless. What was the point of me even being here? And as I went through that, I think sharing really helped me. So when I started sharing, I wasn't in a dark hole by myself anymore, because there were other people reaching out to me saying, I'm in that dark hole. And so then I wasn't there by myself anymore. And from there, I felt like the dark hole turned into a tunnel with an end where I could step out into the light with people, you know?
Yep.
And so I just kept on taking steps, and each step took me further and further into the light. And, you know, like right now, my life is not all light. It's because you can't, I don't know, I just don't believe that it can be all light. There has to be dark in order for there to be light. So now, because I have been completely numb, I embrace all emotion. So if I'm really angry, I allow myself to be really angry. I don't allow it to control me completely, but I'll go into it and I'll feel it. And the same with happiness. You know, that one was harder actually. To sit in the happiness was much harder for me than to sit in the bitterness and the anger and the resentment. So, yeah, so it's just a daily practice for me, making sure that I have defined my values, that I know what they are, and then I just try and live by them. And that doesn't mean that it works all the time, but I'm living now and I don't feel like I was really living before. So I guess the key things are really...
I was taking notes.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I was.
The sharing thing was the big thing for me.
Sharing was really big.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing, I think, because you feel like you're so alone, and who could possibly relate to you? And, you know, that's really where my big healing happened, when I started to focus on service rather than being all inwardly focused, which was what I felt like I was when I was depressed. It was all about me, everybody hating on me. And when I moved into this place where I was like, I just started volunteering. And at first I volunteered for a wildlife service, which was so not aligned with who I was, but I did it to get out, to meet people, and to have a greater purpose than just me sitting in this dark hole on my own. And then I ended up volunteering at different places and found more aligned places that I could volunteer. And now I just kind of I don't live my life in service, but I feel like I'm kind of in service most of the time. And that just gives me greater purpose and meaning.
Yeah. Okay, so here I'm just going to reread those steps you took. You listened to the chatter.
Cool.
You took action. You shared and connected with people. You defined your values, and then you volunteered. And it sounds like it was just like a rinse and repeat cycle.
Yeah, and it still is. It still is. And I'm more committed to me these days too. So I'm committed to learning and growing and looking after myself. And that can be difficult when you're a mum too, you know. It can be Groundhog Day a lot of the time. And sometimes I still lose myself in that. But then I just I don't know, come back to me. It's just about constantly coming back to me. But more than that, it's about coming back to me and sharing.
Sounds like that's even part of the defining values step.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because what I found when I defined my values was what I really valued was connection and communication. They're my two highest values. And so now I try to operate from those most of the time. So doing this podcast is that. It's connection and it's communication. And so I feel like knowing those has been so powerful for me because I know what I can say yes to and what to say no to. If it doesn't align me with those, then it's a no. And I'm not perfect there either. So it's like, yeah, it's constant learning and growth. And so I'm committed to knowing myself better every day so that I can serve better.
Yeah. This is great. So I'm going to put these steps into a little worksheet.
Awesome.
And make it a fun download for this episode because I think it's just too good to not do.
Cool. Share it with me. I would love to see it.
Oh, of course, of course. So that'll be available in the show notes for the episode, and anybody who wants can download that. And I'll do some more research and do some more. Like, I'd love to have a good list of awesome volunteer places too.
Yeah.
At least to start for how do you find a good place to volunteer other than Goodwill or some organization that does volunteering, but that you don't quite love,
Yeah. But, I think like for me, that part of that was also a great experience for me. So I volunteered at some places that didn't really align. And that was actually another lesson for me. So I stayed in these organizations for longer than I should have because I felt indebted. And then it was just a great learning experience because I ended up
it helped you define your values.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, and also helped me back myself. So instead, there was one particular volunteer organization where they wanted me to man the phone lines for 24-hour periods. And people kept on dropping off because it's a lot, and I would get calls at 3 a.m. and it was horrible. But I kept on doing it because I felt obligated. And then every time I would go to quit, someone else would quit. And it would mean that there'd be more falling on my shoulders. And I was like, oh no, just became a victim again. I was like, oh, but I can't let them down. I can't let them down. And then I realized, hang on a second, but you're letting yourself down. And you're showing the universe like that you don't really value yourself. So it was hard. And those things are always really hard, right? When we have to cut ties with someone who needs us. But there are other people that can fill that spot. And sometimes it's someone better suited. But while you're taking that space up, you're not allowing room for somebody else to come in and potentially be the person that they need. Yeah. So,
which comes full circle to cutting your losses.
Totally.
The second you cut your losses, it's like almost too easy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Ugh. Well, I am so grateful that you could join us today. I think that this is so applicable to everyone. And I just think that this needs to be shared.
Thank you. Yeah. It's so weird, isn't it? Like I've questioned over the years, I've questioned my story so much because it's just my life. Like this is just me sharing my life and I've questioned the value of that because going back to the very beginning of that tall poppy thing, right? Like who do you think you are? And what I've realized is when I get out of the way, then I can help more people. And that's what I want to do. That's what I feel like I'm here to do. Give permission for other people to open up as well. Because that's when the good stuff happens.
It really is.
Create the space and we trust.
Well, I trust that you'll keep doing this.
Yeah, I trust that I will too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So beyond the Bare Naked Bravery coloring book, your brave takeaway from today's episode is that 5-step plan for when you find yourself in the thick of it. I've created a little image for you to print off and put on your mirror or near your coffee maker or wherever as a reminder that you still have choice, even when you find yourself all foggy and in the throes of feeling kind of icky about life. That little takeaway image is available in the show notes for this episode. Go to barenakedbravery.com. You'll be able to find Carly's episode there, and abracadabra, it's all yours. Carly and I would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery. You can find Carly Nimmo and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and a lot more places, I'm sure. Go ahead and tag us if you post about anything in the episode so that we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. Also, remember that Carly interviewed me for her own podcast, too. You'll find a link to her podcast, Carlosophies, and a link to download the Bare Naked Bravery coloring book in our show notes. The coloring book features pages from 10 different international artists who support all the bravery getting spread far and wide. You can download those pages and press play on that podcast episode and then just color away. Again, just go to barenakedbravery.com for all those goods. Okay, that's our show this week. Thank you again for listening. There is a lot of stuff out there that you could be listening to, and Carly and I are really grateful that you chose this episode and this interview and this conversation about really important parts of life. If you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it for you, give us a review and rate the show in your iTunes desktop app or on your podcast app on your phone. It really does help us out a lot more than it is a hassle for you, and all the bravery deserves to be spread as far and wide as possible. You are a part of that. In fact, here's a review from Amy Schuber on iTunes. She's from the US, and she says, Emily Ann is sharing beautifully in this podcast. Her curiosity is brilliant, and I love how vulnerability shines the light on how we can all be brave. Inspiring. Love Emily's energy, too. Thank you, Amy. It's really kind of weird to read these things out loud on the podcast, but I know that it's important for others to hear that they aren't alone in knowing that these conversations are really valuable and they're worth sharing with other people. So if you enjoyed this episode, again, go ahead and share it with your friends or leave a review. It really does help, like I said. If you're digging the music in today's episode, that's because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go to barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm really looking forward to being with you next week. We have some awesome things in store for you. Until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.